Madam Chair, we are ready when you are. We will keep an eye out for there is Commissioner Willie. And you have all 5 of your commissioners.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Thursday, October 7th, Washington County Board of Commissioners Roundtable. This is Chair Catherine Harrington, and with me this morning is Commissioner Nafisa Fai, Commissioner and Vice Chair Pam Treese, Commissioner Roy Rogers, and Commissioner Jerry Willie. So we'll have just a morning session today for our roundtable. We do have a few items to go over in this first section. First is to review our rolling agendas and roundtable plans. And the reason for this is that we're at a juncture where our schedule is very full and it leaves little room for emerging issues. So it's really important that not just staff who does a great deal of planning work to make the most of our limited time and availability, which is one of the most precious resources we have, but also to ensure that we know what is coming, the reason why it's set for this particular time frame, and to really have a good appreciation for the number of things that we're trying to land between now, which is the early part of October, through the end of the year, and then into the first month of the new year. I mean, if we think about it, this time last year, we didn't have vaccinations yet. We were struggling a little bit with reopening. Then we had a bit of a crush of a variant surge. No, just the regular variant, the alpha version over the holidays that caused some disruption, that caused things to be pushed out. So just being aware of what we have now so that we're well positioned in continuing to get on with life, living with COVID. Because as we all know, we do have vaccinations now for most people. And for those who aren't vaccinated, we have really excellent safety protocols in place. So onward ho we go together. Also, during the first section of the agenda, I've asked Mr. Carr to bring us a couple of pieces of helpful information. We do have two different state legislative Senate positions where we will need to do appointments. One of them is a multi-commission district, 18 is the number, which involves all 3 metro area commissions. The other Senate District 15 is entirely in Washington County. So just a couple of reminders about that process and protecting your opportunity to participate in that appointment process, the decision making. The second topic I've asked Mr. Carr to bring to life for us here is, now that since the first wave of census information is available, and the legislature has gone through a process for redistricting. Eventually, we will need to go through the process for our own reapportionment. So he has sent us a couple of emails on that, but I thought it would be helpful to bring that to life for us and to give us the opportunity to not only internalize that through verbal discussion, but also Q&A. And then lastly, in this first section, I understand that Commissioner Willie has a topic for discussion on proclamations. Then we'll look at the list of topics that we identified from our recent few roundtables and figure out how we might schedule those in or close them out. Then we'll turn things over to Ms. Angie for a bit of a sync up on our budget landscape. And as we on the board work to contemplate our own direction to her somewhat early in the budget formation process. And then lastly, start our first discussions about process outcomes for having a new program for looking at the county's community strategic plan. So that's what's on the agenda today. Any questions or thoughts on that? No? Okay, let's rock and roll then. So in our packet, we have the rolling agenda as well as the upcoming roundtable plans. So why don't we just briefly touch on each of the months? And Ms. Angie, if you could also help me highlight items that are really some big ticket or somewhat time sensitive, that would be really helpful. I know there are a couple of things that I have flagged for myself, but also commissioners don't hesitate to jump in as well. So the first 3 pages are for the month of October. And we're already looking at next Tuesday, October 12th. So, you know, things looked very much in stride for me. And then you get to Halloween week, October 26th, where things get pretty full. And one of the exciting developments is Native American Heritage Month and moving forward with the land acknowledgement as well, subsequent to that. We're all going to see quite a bit of one another the week of October 18th, as we have on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, the Clean Water Services training sessions with our work session and business meeting on Tuesday, the 19th. Are there any other particular call outs for October, Ms. Angie? Or Diane as well, Diane Taniguchi-Dennis with Clean Water Services. We've never quite been this tight, realizing that, oh, we better take stock.
No, I do want to indicate, you'll see along the header of each of the dates in yellow highlight, no more work session items. It's really the work session time that's being compressed. And so that discussionary prep for board meetings that you'll see, frankly, are really full through the rest of the year.
So I just So Chair, I just want to add, so for Clean Water Services, we're really trying to help with the scheduling, particularly with the work sessions, but there's going to be things like executive sessions that we're going to have to navigate and get through there. But I'm hoping our October training will provide a lot of the background on things that we're working on. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well, the whole time that I've been on the commission, I have found with your leadership and planning abilities, strategic planning especially, that you've always helped us balance that time and have been very thoughtful about it. Thank you. So then, before we know it, it's the month of November. For me personally, it's a unique month because I will be on vacation November 5th through the 14th, and then the 13th, excuse me. Then starting late in the day on the 14th through the 18th, I will be attending in person the Association of Oregon Counties Conference. That will be an in-person conference with all the safety protocols in place. So looking at pages 4, 5, and a little bit of 6 in the, I may not be quoting I'm not quoting the PDF page numbers, rather the sequence of the rolling agendas. You'll see we've got the Enhanced Sheriff Patrol District, levy planning update, land acknowledgement. Oh, a little thing called our state and federal legislative agendas that we've all been having briefings on. Then we get into some redistricting information, some planning work that is influenced outside of us, specifically the Metro Parks and Nature bond from 2019 and providing direction for utilizing the local share. Then as we know, we have the good fortune of the voters having approved resources both for affordable housing and supportive housing services. And those programs are still in the very early years of getting going and early results. So we're trying to make sure we're doing our part so that the community, that we know where the follow through is and that our community has the opportunity of knowing promises made, promises kept as well. We have Thanksgiving, the week following the AOC conference, and with a few different staff people out and so forth. That will be a second week in a row where we will not be having board meetings, which means that business starts to stack up. So a couple of months ago, I recommended that we add a meeting on November 30th. And part of that is influenced by the fact that there are only 2 work weeks, 2 full work weeks during the month of December before the end of the year holidays. So I was trying to find out how we could buy ourselves another week. So that's where the November 30th meeting came in. So Ms. Angie and Ms. Taniguchi Dennis, are there any particular things that I have forgotten or neglected to highlight?
Yeah, on November 9th, I did want to just raise to your attention, because this also aligns with the budget sync up, a review and update on community corrections program and funding. This was a request the board had during the budget process this last year to come back and really understand the state's responsibility, the county's responsibility, and also key legislation and funding allocations that occurred last year. So the timing of this is important, I think, for information for the board as we will be in the budget process at that time. On November 30th, the WCCLS draft funding allocations. This timing is important so that we have the IGAs in place by the end of the year. And then also there is on November 30th, SHS IGA overview and policy direction, which is really a key milestone in our SHS program.
Yep. And our staff has been really deep in the work to define the intergovernmental agreements so that there is consistency amongst the 4 major jurisdictions, Metro in each of the 3 counties, but also in a way that offers flexibility as demonstrated by not only the measure, but also the local implementation plans. So please do expect that staff will be meeting with you or wanting to have a briefing with you ahead of time so that we all have the opportunity to feel somewhat grounded. Then we'll follow up in that work session on November 30th for other additional questions, but also so that we have the benefit of hearing one another's questions and discussion. So if our policy assistants could also help make that magic happen, that would be really great. So I know they play quite a hand in making sure that we have good use of our time. Were there any other highlights folks wanted to make? Oh, yeah, there's a little thing. We have 3 different executives who report to us. Our CAO, our county council, and our Clean Water Services CEO. It just so happens that we have this configuration. I can't quite get that to roll off my tongue. Where by the end of the year, we owe Ms. Angie her annual review. By the end of January, we owe Ms. Taniguchi Dennis her annual review. And we owe Mr. Carr his 6-month review. Now, luckily, this situation of 3 won't happen into the future because afterwards, Mr. Carr's review will come in June. But right now, we have a little bit on our plates. And thank goodness for our great HR folks who are helping us through the process. And I really appreciate how 3 of you have joined me in getting those summaries reviewed, draft reviews put together for our full board consideration. Okay, so then we're looking at a very short month of December. But we have that little bit of a bridge thanks to the November 30th meeting, so that hopefully we're still squeezing a lot of work in before the end of the year, but doing so as comfortably as we can. So we have our meetings on December 7th and the 14th. So this will be the last time these 2 meetings for us to highlight the work of the year per se in our business meetings. We'll have some executive sessions, make sure we've adopted our legislative agendas so that we start the new year off, and then closing out several different things that are time pertinent. You can see them all there. We have the same problem of having a lot of topics to fit into a finite time. And then we have 2 weeks off from formal meetings, as hopefully we can all take a deep breath before we start the new year of 2022. Any comments on just the plan for the end of the year?
So, Chair, I'd like to highlight one item, and I failed to recognize it on November 30th.
Yeah.
During the board meeting, we will have the first of 2 discussions on Census 2020 overview. And so if during the first presentation, if the board would like staff to look at certain areas of the census data and come back, we would be coming back on December 14th board meeting, and we can have further conversation also and look at the data into the following year as well.
Yeah, I'm really interested in understanding where there are different ways that people identify the communities that make up Washington County. So certainly there are jurisdictional boundaries, but there are also community clusters, right? And so I'm trying to better understand where those community clusters are, whether it's based upon cultural and ethnic diversity, age diversity, where do we have more family units versus more single people living, or do we have that full integration? So just trying to understand those characteristics. The other thing I haven't quite parsed out for myself is it seems like there's a couple of waves of census information. So I don't know what to expect if we have really granular level information now, or do we have it just high level and the more granular stuff's coming later? So that's just the kind of overview information I'm looking for. And then, is there any compare and contrast to say 10 years ago, right? So I know with the last census, the 2010 census, I really benefited from seeing graphs that the US Census put out at the national level as well, that showed that after the first few years of the greatest generation, every single year to year zero at that point, we had our population was steady or slightly elevated. So we were seeing family formation every single one of those years. So our population is not ebb and flowing at all like a sine wave. It's high the whole time, which is reflected in terms of our housing needs as well. So anyway, that's what I'm looking for. Any other comments, commissioners? Nope. Okie dokie. Well, if I could pause and take our attention over to the roundtable plans, just to finish out 2021 and starting to set the stage for 2022. So there's 2 pages of it. The first page has October, November, December, and then the next page has the following months. So we've already got today. So I really want to highlight the next 2 months, November 4th and December 2nd. It's all about how are we finishing out the current year, 2021, and how are we setting the stage for the next year? Now, for 2022, unlike last year, we don't have any changes in board leadership as a result of elections. So that means that we can do in 2021, much like we did in 2019, of use November to take stock of where things are landing for the end of the year in 2022 and start to frame up our board initiatives and focus for 2022. So discussions 1 of 2 in November and discussions 2 of 2 in December. So then when we get to January, Shazam, we'll have all that stuff laid out for ourselves. We can certainly do fine tuning, but I think we'll be in good stead. Then we get to January. Shazam, 2022 already. Wow, the decade's going by quickly. So we do have a holiday day in January. So I've switched myself over to the rolling agenda for January. And we can see we pick right back up with having some MISTIP information to go over. Formally, the only committee designation assignment we need to do is the vice chair, but it's good form for us to annually take a look at our committee assignments and see if we want to make any adjustments at all. And then for the remaining 3 business weeks of the year, once again, we have time-sensitive things to go over. And on January 25th, we have an item that has been underway for a couple of years now, and we'll finally get the results of the use of force independent review for the sheriff's office. Anything else, Ms. Angie or Ms. Taniguchi-Dennis, you want to highlight for January? And of course, here we are in October, so there may be some refinements as well, but we'll at our first roundtable of the year, we'll take stock of what's ahead of us. By then, we'll have our sightline to the first 6 months of the year. So we'll have some work to do to make sure we get the ballot referral for the Enhanced Sheriff Patrol District levy, and just have things set up so that we can do the good work of decision making for our community. Anything else? There's a lot of behind the scenes work, discussions that I have with Ms. Angie and Ms. Taniguchi Dennis on the timing and what items to make sure we bring forward for full board discussion versus just handle through one-on-ones. And then even more planning and adjustment work that our staff does on a weekly basis as well. So it may look straightforward and sound straightforward, but there's a lot of work that goes behind all this stuff. So.
Actually, Chair, I did have an item that just came to me. So I do want to flag the area titled Future Roundtable topics. I think
we're going to go over that a little bit later.
Okay. Okay.
Don't worry, we haven't forgotten it.
Okay.
Not at all. Is that okay?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. bring, I think you're alluding to a thought of pragmatism. So bring that later on as well, right? We will continue to have the rolling agendas at our fingertips when we go through that conversation. Great. All righty. Well, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Carr to take us through a couple of topics.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. The two topics that Chair Harrington mentioned, the appointment of the replacement state senators and reapportionment, the things I want to talk about very briefly. As you know, 2 state senators have announced their intention to resign. They have not actually resigned yet. Once they resign, and Kevin, we can hold off on that presentation for a minute if that's okay. That's the next part, but let me go through this one first. Once they actually resign, and I believe Senator Burdick has announced that she will resign effective November 1st when she takes up a new office. There's a 20-day period in which the party of which the senator is a member must meet and provide between 3 and 5 names to the county commission. And as the chair mentioned, Senator Burdick represents a district that spans 3 counties. And so that vote is apportioned based on the population from the respective counties in the district that's being represented. So, and then each county gets that number of votes. So you will then be given 3 to 5 names to select from, and you can choose. It's important to remember that this is an inherently political process in which you need to be apolitical. So I would urge you not to. You are being lobbied, I'm sure, by folks who would like these positions, and that's fine. That's the nature of the process. I urge you to refrain from endorsing. There's no restriction on you endorsing someone, but if you do endorse, there creates appearance that you've made up your mind before the process has begun. And that could create problems, and you may be asked to recuse yourself from the actual process if you've made an endorsement earlier. So you obviously will be asked, and I would ask you to say your county council has advised you not to make an endorsement at this time. You certainly can endorse after the selection, and either way, you can endorse for or against. That is your First Amendment right, but. At this point, I would advise very strongly that you refrain and that you blame me for that refraining to sort of protect you from any potential allegation that there is some appearance that you've made up your mind. And so, Kevin, can we put up the PowerPoint that I've got? Now, on reapportionment, as you saw on the rolling agenda, the staff has a presentation prepared for November 9th. That will provide detail on the substance. I just wanted to give you a few notes on the process at this point. So just get in your mind some dates. So can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. So as I said at the top, I've noted November 9th for a working session. You'll get far more detail. The process is set out in Section 84 of our county charter. And the county charter says that you reapportion after the decennial redistricting of the state house and senate districts. Now, that because of the pandemic and the delay in the census, we have a sort of interesting and challenging time right now. We've got an initial, as the chair noted, initial census data that suggests that there are one or more districts that meet the standard in section 104, which is the second bullet up on the slide. That is, if any district is more than 105% of the population of any other district, we are required to prepare a plan. It's important to note the way this process works. So it has to occur after the decennial redistricting. That has not occurred. And I've got another slide. The next slide will give you the dates for that, which I'll provide in a second. But once that has occurred, so you have no authority right now to redistrict because the charter says it has to happen after the state legislative districts, and that has not occurred and will not occur until next year, most likely. The other thing that you should remember is that we can't redistrict while an election is going on. An election is going on from the first date for filing. The first date for filing under Oregon law is 250 days before the election, which in the case of the April election was September 9th. So there is no way for you to redistrict for the 2022 election. The redistricting will at earliest affect the 2024 election. There is a timeline in the charter that says the board has 90 days after you receive a plan to redistrict. There is no timeline restricting how long it takes to develop the plan. And staff's proposal, which you will hear on November 9th, is to engage in robust community outreach to help develop that plan. So it will not be quick. So once we begin the process, the development of the plan, we will hire an outside consultant. Portland State specializes in this area and has done it in the past. But we will also look to balance issues of equity and fairness as we make the proposal, the plan for the commission. The commission, as I said, once it receives the plan, will have 90 days to consider it, which should be ample time. But please do not expect that you will receive it quickly. And you will, of course, be invited to participate in community outreach and how we develop that. So that process will begin with the November 9th meeting, where we will lay this all out in much greater detail. And now, can we go to the next slide? And I will start talking. As you all know, the census was delayed. Normally, the census comes in April of the year after it's completed. So it would have been April 2021. And there are timelines that basically require the Senate, the legislature to complete the redistricting by August. But as you know, we did not get the initial census data until the end of August, so they couldn't possibly. There was a lawsuit filed by the Secretary of State and the Speaker of the House. And the importance of this is, under state law, if the legislature does not meet its timeline for reapportionment, the Secretary of State gets to do it. So the Secretary of State asserted that the legislature had not met their timeline, so the Secretary of State would do reapportionment. The Supreme Court decided that under the circumstances, it was appropriate to set up a timeline to give the legislature time to do the reapportionment in consideration of the late receipt of the census data. So the legislature was required to adopt the plan by September 27th if it was going to be allowed to do the reapportionment. The legislature achieved that, so the Secretary of State will now not be doing the reapportionment. Any objections to that plan are due to the Supreme Court by October 25th. We expect that there will be objections. It's possible that if there are no objection, the plan goes into effect January 1st, and then we can begin our reapportionment process after that. If there are objections, responses are due November 8th. Replies from the original objectors are due November 15th. If the court finds that the plan is compliant, notwithstanding the objections, The court will issue an approval on November 22nd. If the court issues that approval, it will be effective January 1st. If the court finds that it's not compliant, it will issue an opinion on December 6th stating that. Allow for revisions now by the Secretary of State by January 17th, with approval of corrections by January 31st, and the plan will become effective February 1st. And then we can begin our process after that. So the process for the county can begin either in January or February, depending on what happens in the Supreme Court on the approval or rejection of the legislative plan. But again, I want to emphasize that that's the beginning of a somewhat lengthy process to redistrict in time for the 2024 election, which of course would have to be completed by the beginning of September 8th, I think, or 9th of 2023. So there is a timeline if we want to do this September, have this effective for the 2024 election, which of course is important because you don't want someone questioning where they should file. So that's my presentation. As I said, you will get far more details on November 9th.
Thank you. That was really helpful. I've had a bunch of folks ask me questions here and there, expecting, okay, the legislature's done its work. Now, when do you guys do your work? So it's really helpful to have this general sketch and to understand the key possibilities that could be going on. Because I was keyed off of just, okay, the legislature's done its work, so all is said and done. So this really helped me a lot. One detailed question, if I might ask, and it's okay to say, hold it till that work session. So you have this general outline. Will the elections for state legislative positions in the primary in May be affected by this reapportionment?
I don't know the answer to that, Chair. Let me look. It depends on whether or not it'll be final 250 days before the election. I think that's the plan, but I'd have to do the math. And I have not looked at that issue.
Okay, because there are folks who have already declared that they're running for those new districts. So it's an interesting question. And since county elections runs the elections process in May, folks are used to posing those questions to Washington County, even though they're for positions that are elsewhere. So I'm really looking forward to some further information at that work session.
Well, Chair, thank you. I will make sure we have an answer to that question on November 9th.
Are there any other commissioner questions or thoughts, heads up or advanced questions you want to mention now? Go ahead, Commissioner Willie.
Yeah, it's not on the reapportionment. It's back on the first topic that Tom touched on with Burdick and the appointments. Did you say that the 3 counties will be weighing in on that? And if that's the case, are we all equal in vote, or
no? The votes.
I don't know how much of. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The votes are apportioned based on the number of residents each county has in the district. You get 1 vote for every 100,000 voters in the district from the county, and so
do we know how many? Do we know how many votes we get?
I do not know. No. Okay. We can certainly figure that out, though, Commissioner Ward.
No, I was just wondering. It was interesting.
I'm sorry. Clerk Moss has the lead on this, and he may have a better answer.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Commissioner Willie, when the seat is declared vacant, the board will receive a letter from the Secretary of State's office that will highlight the weighted vote that each county has for the meeting to decide what, based on the amount of residents. So we will receive that information once the seat is declared vacant.
Do we have any idea?
In looking at Senator Burdick's district, it's kind of the eastern edge of Washington County, so it stretches a little bit from Commissioner Treese's district down through Commissioner Rogers. So I believe, and then it blends into Multnomah County. So I think the numbers are going to be pretty close. But I think Multnomah may have a little bit of the edge based on the population.
And none of Clackamas County.
In looking at the map, it would be a small smidgen.
Okay. All right. That's all. We can figure that out later. I just wondered. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question, Chair Harrington. Okay. I think to question Jerry asked a while back when there was an article in the Oregonian about the Senator Burdick's seat. I think they said Washington County and Multnomah County and one commissioner of Clackamas County will get to decide. But that was almost a year ago. It sounds like back in the summertime. But my question to you is to Tom, and it's going back to not the reapportionment piece, but the appointments. It sounds like some of the district is changing, and it sounds like Senator, the map that got approved is going to be predominantly Washington County now, and so does that impact the where the district is now? Will that impact who gets to appointment, or are we appointing as is right now without the new map?
Commissioner Fye, there is a state law on that is somewhat complex that I read briefly, and I don't confess to understand or be able to give you an answer off the top of my head. But I'd be happy to take a closer look at that and give you an answer based on how reapportionment affects the appointment process.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much for the summaries on both of those topics. I don't see any other commissioners coming off of mute, so I think we're all set on those two topics. Thank you, Tom. And now Commissioner Willie asked me a question in a recent one-on-one about the process for who reads proclamations. And so I wanted to bring that back here. Sometimes, there's advanced planning and staff makes arrangements. Other times it's like, okay, last minute, where's their interest on the board? Certainly the numbers of proclamations ebbs and flows as well. So I'll turn it over to him and see what kind of discussion you all want to have.
Well, it's kind of fairly easy, but I've always believed that when we read a proclamation, that it has more impact and certainly communicates that this is not just a proclamation, but we really are endorsing what it is that we're including in the proclamation. And so if one of us as commissioners read it, or we have an organization that is associated with that, read it, to me, it has more emphasis. And so I was just suggesting that we kind of take that responsibility off the staff and we take that on as commissioners. So we would be individually looking out ahead of things and saying, I really like that proclamation. I'll read that proclamation, or someone else. But I'd kind of like the commission, or like I said, offer it to the organizations that it impacts, like domestic violence, and have someone from that organization read the proclamation rather than just our staff read it. So that's all I was suggesting.
Chair Hanton, did you wanted to say something?
No, go right ahead.
just for contacts and for my own understanding, Commissioner Willie, are you saying that it will be the responsibility of the commissioners to come prepared for these proclamations? Because I feel like I was here, I've only witnessed few, and I really appreciated the process for the staff had and the amount of work that went into to come prepared. I'm not sure if I can sign on to say I'll come and take on, but is that what you're suggesting? So the responsibility will be on the commissioners?
Well, obviously, let's just use domestic violence as an easy one because we just did that. That I would ask the staff to reach out to a representative from the domestic violence environment and ask if they would read the proclamation. And I think they would welcome that invitation. If that is not the case, if there isn't an organization like the one coming up, if a commissioner would look at that and say, you know, I can do that. I mean, it's not like you got a lot of homework you got to do to read the proclamation. I just think it sounds like we are more supportive if one of us reads it rather than just assigning that to a staff person. But I was just suggesting that if you don't want to participate in that, you don't have to. So it's strictly optional.
For myself, one of the things that we did in 2019 and the early part of 2022 is there were multiple proclamations that were really identified with the full board. So no one commissioner generally was provided the opportunity to own or claim a proclamation. Rather, we just alternated through the commissioners reading the different sections of the proclamation. I have really appreciated how staff has helped bring the multiple cultural proclamations to life with having folks come with a presentation to share their stories and then to read the proclamation. I think to me that's very meaningful. When there's a proclamation with regard to our policy stance, so to speak, or our political stance or values-based, that's where I have tried to operationalize that the board take that up. There's one proclamation that I recall being annual from a global community standpoint. That is the Domestic Violence Awareness Month that Commissioner Willie has mentioned. And I've appreciated how the various organizations and the district attorney's office and the sheriff's office have pulled together that presentation and the reading. There have also been some other proclamations that are pretty staff-driven that relate to awards, association planning, and that's where I've really relied upon staff to own their own topic, so to speak, and bring it to life. And so it's up to them. And if they don't want to do it, well, you know, there's a certain privilege that comes along with being the board clerk. And I want to make sure that we don't have pressure in our meetings such that our board clerk feels under pressure to read a proclamation like those old FedEx commercials, rather takes the genuine, sincere time or takes the time for a sincere delivery of the words, because that's what it's all about. That's why we read them, as opposed to just do it by title only and, gavel the vote, and that's that. So sometimes it's a little hard to tell if staff has done the logistics or not, but our board clerk and alternate clerk have really stepped forward and been participating in the rolling agenda. So for the last year or so, it hasn't been sort of last minute like the logistics have felt, to me at least, in 2019. So I think looking ahead, most of our proclamations will continue to be more on the community multicultural side, with the occasional professional association. So that's what I see anyway.
And just for clarification, how you communicated that was much better than the way I did it, Chair. These are the ones that I was suggesting, such as the one we just had last week was National Community Planning Month in Washington County. So that would be one that just one of the commissioners would read. And again, it's because there wasn't any organizations affiliated to that. The other ones that there are, I think they've done an excellent job and much better than certainly I would have done had I just read that. So I'm not suggesting that we change the entire thing, just the one specific ones that really don't have an organization affiliation, and that the commission would do that rather than the staff. But that's just a suggestion. And I guess if I want to step in and ask to read it, I'm assuming Kevin will allow me to do that. And so that'll be on me. But that was just a conversation, just a suggestion I was making. And if you don't want to do it, fine.
I think the one thing.
Go ahead.
I think for me, I think if we're going to loop in an organization, like, we have to be cognizant, and I think we have to do it in a meaningful way, that we're not just, like, certain communities have, like, who do we involve and what does that process look like? And how do we get to choose the organization that we're going to uplift and bring forward? So I think for me, I would like to understand more of that process, that we're not just promoting certain organizations and we're not tokenizing certain organizations. So I think understanding our own process of who are the organizations that we work with each issues, and what is the process of giving them a platform to come forward and read this proclamation with us. I don't, and also I think like, there are, each proclamations that I've seen, like, I agree with you, Jerry. I think it's, if you're interested in taking that on and bringing that forward, but I think there needs to be more thought, that I wouldn't want to be asked on the spot, hey, Nafisa, do you want to read this proclamation? Because I think there's some of the content have some emotions and history and things that are, it's just, I feel like it's not just words. It's a lot more than words that we're reading. And sometimes it's pain and hurt that certain people experience. And we're trying to say, we are here to change this. So it's a little different than just reading words on a document, that it needs to be more thought and more staff involvement. But I'm supportive of if any commissioner wants to participate in that process. But I certainly don't want any of, like, sort of the moment, hey, Nafisa or Harry, so-and-so, read this proclamation, that it needs to be, because I wouldn't want to butcher any words, and I wouldn't want to state or apply less emotion to certain content, certain paragraphs in that proclamation. I'm just looking more of sort of like, what is the process that we're going to agree on collectively? And what does that look like? And some identification process of who are the organizations that we're going to loop into these. And agree on that list of organizations, because I wouldn't want to also leave out anyone that we work with as a county.
There's also one other aspect of this that I've tried to at least leave space for, but I don't think is necessarily understood. And that is with some of the proclamations that are more professionally driven, such as the community planning one, or something around the public health professions, or mental health month. That's where, once again, for staff, they're often the subject matter experts. And there's an opportunity there for the department directors as well as the assistant county administrators who manage that portfolio on a day-to-day basis, whereas we're at a higher level. So I don't want to see us grandstanding by trying to represent that, but also ensure that we're working in partnership with our staff. So it's all very conversational leading up to that, as opposed to necessarily having some set process. So those are just my thoughts on it.
Wow, I didn't intend for this to be more complex. I didn't intend this to be harder. I was saying that there are some proclamations that don't have all of those affiliations, that are just a proclamation. And I think it sounds better to come from the commission itself rather than assign it to staff. Those would be fairly rare, and certainly would not be, you would, as a commissioner, would not be asked at the last minute to read it. So, we can stay doing what we're doing. I was just making a suggestion here. I certainly didn't intend to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. So let's just leave it alone.
Oh, actually, I don't think we're just leaving it alone. Rather, for at least you, myself, and Commissioner Treese, we've had the opportunity to see how it's ebbed and flowed for the last 2 3/4 years. And just looking ahead, we've just checkpointed some different thoughts and experiences. So as we go forward, we've had the benefit of some discussion. I haven't worried about hard, easy, or otherwise. So, but rather just some things to take into consideration. That's all. So I really appreciate having the benefit of the conversation. We don't often have time, and that's one of the purposes of having a roundtable, is to just take a breath and have the opportunity to have some discussion about how we go about this work on behalf of our community. So I appreciate your bringing the topic forward. Thank you. Commissioner Treese.
I think what I'm hearing Commissioner Willie say is, how can we enhance the heartfeltness of a proclamation? And I think, Commissioner Willie, I'd ask you if that's the core of what you're saying. And I don't think it puts a responsibility on any of us, but I also hear what Nafisa's saying from the standpoint of, not wanting to step into a space that has, where there are others that are closer to the issue and can relate to that. But I don't think that they're mutually exclusive.
Nope. It's an art, not a science.
And it makes me realize that I'm going to stand up and look at what our proclamations are coming down through the rolling agenda and understand, so that I have the opportunity to raise my hand if it's something that I think I would like to read or actively participate. I know I certainly work hard to offer the motion if it's something that's close to me, and I know that all of us do that. So, but it's certainly worth looking at underscoring the importance of these proclamations by having a commissioner that might be so inclined to read those.
And I think it's important to remind ourselves as well, irrespective of who reads it, we each have the opportunity to make comment before or after we take the vote to adopt a proclamation. So it's a very inclusive process. No one is left out of the process. At least no one from the board is left out of the process, right? There's no ownership. It's rather a together aspect. Okay. Anything else on this, Ms. Angie?
So staff have looked at the proclamations and mapped out the proclamations from 2019 to now to do, in essence, pre-planning and establish a business rhythm on the rolling agenda. So in case it's helpful, I can send that table out to the board so you can see what the annual sequence of proclamations are. In addition, I do want to raise, I appreciate the time that the commission gives to the Heritage Celebration Months. We have employees across the organization and community members who are presenting, reading the proclamation, and it is very meaningful for those individuals, specifically employees, to have that opportunity to interact with the board. And they've just appreciated the board's time in that process.
Well, let me be clear about this. I was not suggesting we change any of that. I was just suggesting that the proclamations that do not have any direct affiliation with an organization or with staff or anything else, that we would not have staff read it, that a commissioner would read it. So I'm not suggesting any of those kinds of changes, because I like those and appreciate those and think they'd certainly have a lot of value. I was just suggesting the ones that don't, such as the one we just had last week.
Commissioner Willie,
So,
that's why that table I think will be helpful. And I just hadn't had the opportunity before to share the feedback from employees. So just wanted to take this opportunity, and I understand what you're saying.
okay.
All righty. Anything else? Nope. Great. We can move on then. The board work moving forward list. So if you look at the roundtable plan document, the page that has October 7, November 4th, and December 2nd, perhaps Clerk Moss, if you could display that page real briefly. Whoa. Any chance you could zoom that view? Is that?
Let me see what I can do.
If you bring it up in a Adobe Reader window versus a browser. But that's okay, we can see it. So I'll just zero in on it. We have the list, and you can see that we had our first climate change discussion, which was the work that we had asked our two agencies to put together about how we operationally are addressing climate change and our role as the two agencies, Washington County as well as Clean Water Services. And our staff continues to operationalize. How do we make sure that we are delivering value for our community, both in the short term and the long term, and being efficient with all the types of resources that we have. We have been getting, we have presentations coming to us through our rolling agenda about the state's climate adaptation framework. So I think a big thing for us moving forward through the end of the year and into next year is participating in that rulemaking process. We just got an update recently in a work session from staff, Ms. Doyle, as well as Mr. Roberts' team. And we do have a role we have to play with that. And certainly our work on House Bill 2001 and middle housing that is coming to us that we have to finish by June of 2022, all plays a role in this, as well as with our Major Streets Transportation Investment Plan financing program and the URMD, Urban Roads Maintenance District, that connectivity to make sure that we have efficient travel options of all types and that people can get their everyday needs met safely and comfortably, whether they walk, roll on, a skateboard, wheelchair, scooter, bicycle, or in a motorized vehicle. So I'm not sure, given that we have those program setups, I'm not sure how the commission wants to look ahead and come back to climate change specifically. At this stage, this is where I wish I had a whiteboard. We were in the room together. I would like to propose that we just take that topic and push it off to potentially the second half of the year, to checkpoint it in the second half of the year, because we do have those critical things that we have to do by external expectations. Does that seem like a reasonable approach on that particular one? Well, it's a starting point. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
I'm not sure that I understand what you mean by push. Can you explain to me what we're pushing off to the second half of the year? I'm sorry if it just didn't sink in. Are we pushing off the discussion around climate change to the second half of next year?
Well, given that we have work on our plate already on those various things that are related to
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
I was suggesting that I don't think we have a very full plate of tasks we're already doing, some related to making sure we're operationalized climate adaptation. So unless there's something more specific, why don't we take that topic and just check back in on it in the second half of the year to see if there's something more that we think we should be doing policy-wise or investment-wise.
So I would be more comfortable if we position this as we are working on the
Operationalizing.
Thank you. The first half of the year, instead of it, I'm getting a lot of pressure from constituents, as we all are. I just want to make sure that our verbiage isn't doesn't have the opportunity to be interpreted that we're pushing climate change off into the future. That's all I'm concerned about. So I think that just by underscoring what you're saying around how our attention is focused on climate change in the first half of the year and what it's going to be focused on in the second half, that makes me more comfortable.
Additionally, as you mentioned, we are getting requests from some constituents to convene some special board and commission around advising us on our climate work. And now is a really good time for us to discuss what, if anything, we want to take on in that regard. I know I have my opinion, and I'm happy to share that as a starting point.
Please do.
One of the reasons why we had that overview that we did a few months ago was to highlight how the two agencies are already doing good work. We're not ignoring climate change. And we also know that there are additional challenges ahead of us. You know, let's take this, our emergency response for 2021 as one example, where we had 3 hot weather events, heat waves this year, one of which was a heat dome, June, July, and August, holy smokes. So we are naturally operationalizing what our response needs to be. Do we need to make adjustments in our planning and our work going forward? So we're already doing a lot, and our departments and our general communication team is, we're trying to figure out how to give them a little bit more space, time to discuss those kinds of things versus the emergent hot issues of the day. So my point here is we're already doing a lot of work in this space. It's incumbent upon the 5 of us to be talking about that more, as opposed to having some set program called climate change. I think we are doing a good job in operationalizing this. While we are getting asked with regard to having some special board and commission, I don't see a need for that. It feels like greenwashing to me, which is a phrase folks were using years ago around climate change. So those are just my thoughts. But there's 5 of us, so what are yours?
I would tend to agree. It's not like we're all going to sit down and have a 2-hour conversation on what our policy is on climate change. I mean, we can have that conversation, but for me, again, I was thinking more of the process that we're going through for the forest management plan through the forest trust lands. And so climate change is not like one particular thing that we're going to do. It's a whole bunch of, I'll call them smaller things, but added up, they equal a big thing. And so, yeah, paying attention to some of the operational changes that we can make, such as encouraging battery powered blowers. And so again, we kind of take small bites at this apple, and we're communicating a message throughout that whole process that we're cognizant of climate change and doing what things that we can do within our own realm of decision making. So I guess that's kind of what I was thinking as we go through this. So it's little baby steps as we go through, with all of us being on the same page of what our focus is on improving climate change.
Any other thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I'll chime in. Looking at the various initiatives, we are not only having thrust at us, but those things that we're also looking at internally. This particular one, I would agree with you. There's a lot of small steps being done. I think, Jerry, your comment about bite sizes is a good comment. Jerry, your comment regarding not forgetting, but making space for it at a more appropriate time is appropriate. And so I totally agree. This is the second half of next year kind of an issue.
I think checking in, seeing how it's going. Yeah. Okay. Well, seeing none. Commissioner Treese.
I would like to add that I agree with what you're saying. I think that we are looking at all of these issues through a lens of climate change. There's no question when we talk about individual activities. I'm thinking that we need to. I need to be better at communicating. And I want to, I want to be able to say that that's what we do, is that we look at our issues through a lens of climate change.
Okay. The next one, service level and urban services discussion. You might remember when we were talking about this, just developing the list in the summer. I think this was the meeting in July with Julia Novak. We went around the room and collected topics, and this is one that came up. I think there's a somewhat of a nexus here with two different topics. One is every year when we go through the budget, we have the stresses and strains. Our revenues, with the exception of special levy revenues, ESPD, Urban Road Maintenance District, as two examples, North Bethany Service District for roads is a third. Those three are place specific with regard to urban unincorporated Washington County, as opposed to being county-wide resources. So we have adopted policies to expend county-wide resources on county-wide services. We do continue to get requests from, steady stream, not necessarily the same voices, but a steady stream of folks, particularly with our land use and more so the land use work plan, right? The ordinances. And so there's this continuous diet about, or continuous request asking us to add more, but without any additional revenue sources. That is the extent. So that's the first aspect of it. The second, the budget part. The second part of that intersection or nexus is with the community strategic plan, which is a future project. When I started on the commission in January of 2019, I would have thought that we'd be kicking that program off already here in the second half of 2021. But then this thing called a global pandemic has sort of thrown a wrench into the works. So it's a future thing. And so I don't see any reason or I have forgotten from our summer discussion the need to really come back to this topic independent of those two efforts. But please, colleagues, remind me if I have forgotten something. or if this is close to any of your hearts. Commissioner Willie.
Well, I think I just had a briefing yesterday on the strategic facilities plan, and this blends to me right into that. We were talking about what services, municipal services, county services, urban services, those kinds of things, and certainly what facilities might look like 10 years from now and all those kinds of things. That report is coming back to us on December 9th. I would say this blends in perfectly with that conversation on December 9th. And so we just kind of put a little flag right there and say to be continued on December 9th and then into the future. So I think this is going to come up on that presentation.
So that speaks to the geographical nature of delivery, right?
Well, we talked about not only geographical, but we talked about just what do you think county services, basic services are going to look like 10 years from now. And as an example, 2015, when I was mayor, we were talking about that internet has become a basic service like water and like sewer and like everything else that is considered to be a basic services that the cities provide. I think the counties will be needing to look at that, especially in our urban unincorporated areas. Anyway, so that was the conversation I was having with the group with the strategic facilities plan yesterday. So we have to look at what service level and what services to be able to plan that geographical footprint that you referred to. So I think it all comes under the same umbrella. I mean, that's my perspective anyway.
Well, I do want to observe that I think you're having a different experience with the briefings on that strategic facility master plan than I am. So
I asked them if I had wandered afar, and they said, well, we didn't give you any parameters. We just wanted to hear from you. So, right. Maybe I was totally out in left field on that, and they allowed me to do that. But it's still, if we're talking about service level and urban services, we have to be talking about how does that figure into facilities planning. I mean, to me, that's part and parcel. But again, just my opinion.
It certainly adds to the laundry list of aspects that facility's strategic master plan is potentially looking at. So I think Ms. Angie's going to be challenged to pull that topic together in a way that all five of us know what the heck is going on. What does it include? What does it not include, such that we can get something defined that we've never had before. So stay tuned.
I'll throw in a couple of remarks as well. As you know, I brought that up and I continue to bring it up because there's nothing more important in my mind for the future operations, internal operations of this county, in defining where we're going, who we want to be. It's a huge issue. For those of us who were around in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and remember Multnomah counties and their efforts, they did that and successfully transitioned from a more full service county to something that looks like they are today. And so I keep stressing, and your point, Jerry, I was the first one on the facilities because I asked, I said, am I first, last, which one am I? And they said, you're the first. And I said, well, how do you plan anything if you don't know what you're going to be? And that's true of our CEO when you evaluate her. How do you evaluate when you don't have any parameters or any metrics on where you want to go? It's very, very difficult other than do I like you and how you're managing people. So to me, this is a huge topic. If all of a sudden 200,000 people were to join the cities, we would need completely different facilities, completely different sheriff's department, completely different land use and planning department. I've said this, and to all of you, and I say it again, I'm willing to put some real effort into this one because it's what's going to happen in the future. Whether you become a part of it now or become a part of it later, it's critical, and that doesn't minimize any of the other things we're talking about. This is just the operational model for the county. And I can tell you the cities have a very different perspective. They had that 36, 7 years ago when I got there. They were saying, double tax, we want people to pay for a certain level of service. They still are saying that. Their crescendo is maybe going up a little bit because they continue to nibble away at the areas. But I think it's a big critical issue, and it needs to be done. We can continue to kick it down the street, not by design, just because of circumstances, or we can take it on. And it fits into every little thing that we do, everything. And so I think it's an important issue.
So, Ms. Angie, I think you may want to revisit the amount of time that is planned for that strategic facilities master plan. I know I reminded the team as they were working from a fluid to no agenda in the meeting with me that we have quite a laundry list of facilities we know, irrespective of what population growth may be. Right? We have a scenario now. We know what our portfolio is now. So one scenario they should be planning is that portfolio of services out for the next 10, 20 years. And I believe I gave them my thoughts on some other scenarios, but they need to be clear with us about what sort of planning are they going through with these high dollar consultants. So, we're trying to move from having individual ad hoc projects without any clear strategic portfolio, strategic plan or master plan to having something. So I think what I'm hearing is twofold. This topic will come in both for the strategic facilities master plan and later in our conversation about process outcomes with the community strategic plan. Does that sound clear? Okay, any other comments before we move on?
I have sort of like a low lift question here. And it's something that you reminded me, Chair Harrington, when you said the consultant that we brought in the summer when we had our in-person first time meeting. I was wondering, are we planning, and I don't know if this is a question for the board or specifically to Tanya, but are we planning? That was a really great session and a lot of great outcomes came out of that facilitated conversation. Are we planning to bring back the Novak group?
Do you have any particular suggestions or needs in mind?
I don't know. That was really a fruitful discussion and really great conversation, and I certainly benefited, and I think a lot of great outcomes came out of that. And I was just wondering if there is any future plans for our board, either roundtables or other venues that hasn't been explored, to bring that group back and to see if we can have a sort of similar conversation. I don't have it to say let's bring it back next month or the month after that, but I know it was productive, and there's value to bringing them back.
I'm certainly open to it. It's just a matter of programming it into future roundtables and being clear about what what the goal or objective is for that. So if you have suggestions, great. That's why we have this roundtable rollout plan.
Great job, Chair Harrington, throwing it back to me. I think I'm just asking everyone to see if there's any benefits to bringing them back. We can continue that conversation, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I wrote it down with just a question mark on the future roundtable list. Okay, so I think we've taken care of the first two. The next one is term limit discussion. This is a topic that Commissioner Rogers continues to bring up. And if I recall, the background on this is sometime last year or so, he expressed concern that there could be a ballot initiative. Okay, fine. Right now, our charter doesn't have term limits. I've expressed each time this topic has come up that I think that after we go through the community strategic plan program, there may be different topics for charter change from there. And so I just plunk that into that possibility and go from there. Nothing's burning a particular hole in my pocket, but I don't have the years of service that you do either, Commissioner Rogers. So the intention was for discussion. So here we are. Do we want to discuss it today or plug it into some either future roundtable conversation or a work session?
Yeah, we can. My interest is obviously, I think just about every jurisdiction, Metro included, has term limits, especially as we move forward. My area didn't have them for a number of jurisdictions, now does. One of the things I've heard from those who are interested is with pandemic, it's harder to organize and get the signatures that they need. I haven't lost my appetite for it. I had hoped that maybe Tom could work with me a little bit and put together at least a proposal, and I would bring that back. Generally, I just tell you my thoughts is that I think 3 terms is probably a good limit. That's what Metro does as well. And so that's sort of where I'm heading in my mind. But nobody's going to do much with the shutdown in the economy right now as far as the pandemic is going. They're not going to do a lot, but I'd rather be in front of a project instead of behind it. And so I haven't lost my appetite. I just would like to maybe work with Tom, have something that we can discuss in the near future. And if people don't want to take it up, fine, and we'll let the public do that. But I think I would like to shape it a little bit myself. So that's where I'm at.
Well, I'll just say 2 things that have influenced my thinking on adding things to the ballot is 1, cost. They're not free elections. You have to pay for them. And second, I've had quite a learning opportunity with 4 of the 5 members of the current board with the 2 county-wide referrals that we had in 2019 and who did and did not participate in representing those county commission referrals. So this is not putting anything on the ballot is not a light endeavor. We've seen how in the past 2 decades, the county has put things on the ballot without the commission actively pursuing those out in the community once they're referred, and they tend to fail. So, or at least that's the track record. So, that's why I think if our community strategic plan has some topics, let's have a charter review committee do the work and be most efficient with everybody's time. That's all.
I think it's a good idea to have a charter review committee. Are you proposing that so that we would put that together in the near future?
I think it should be coupled with the community strategic plan.
What's your time on that in your mind?
We're going to be talking about that later this afternoon. As you well know,
No, this morning, you mean?
you're right,
Yeah.
later in the agenda. As you well know, we are not well positioned to take on another project at this stage of the game. Ms. Angie has told all of us already, it's likely to be second half of next year before we can even kick that project off, and it's going to be a multi-year effort. So at what point we would impanel a charter review committee is dependent upon what that work plan will be.
I would encourage a charter review committee, and I guess if others don't feel that way, that's fine. But I think that's a good start and something in the near future, not something further out. But that's my thoughts.
Okay. So I think we're all set for now on that one. Community engagement compensation discussion. This is one where I think we're just taking stock of the fact that as we move forward and more heavily rely upon our community engagement team to help us pull in aspects of our community that are historically not active with us, that we don't take for granted people's time and ability to participate. So I don't know that there's much more for us to discuss as opposed to making sure that we have at least a majority of commissioners that want to ask Ms. Angie to figure out how to spend some staff resources to scope this topic out for us. I know I'm interested in it. Oh, I see Commissioner Fai's thumb is up. I see Commissioner Treese thumbs up. Okay. Jerry?
I'm kind of neutral.
Yep.
If that's
Yep.
what you want to do, okay.
And I don't know what kind of, she's going to have to determine for us at what point into the future current staff has the bandwidth to scope that out for us. We don't need a commitment today, to be clear. But, okay. So the resolution on this one is to have Ms. Angie scope this topic with staff and schedule it into a future rolling agenda. And it may be on their parking lot list to figure out how and when, and that's fine too. Okay? Ms. Angie, you okay with that? Okay, terrific. Last one, industrial lands discussion. I'm not sure what this one is. I just can't remember the details. I do know that Metro has their requirement to adopt a new urban growth report before the end of 2024. And that's about all I remember. Has anybody got a clue? I haven't gone back to the notes from that July roundtable myself, so that may be something we all need to do. Commissioner Treese?
I believe that I was one of the people that recommended that we put this under discussion along with Commissioner Willie. And the issue here is what is in our wheelhouse in relationship to industrial land opportunities to support economic development. I think, and Commissioner Willie, I turn it to you and ask for any additional comment here.
Yeah, I think big picture is, as you know, Catherine, new on Metro Council, and they continue to do this. There's an industrial lands inventory that gives us a snapshot region-wise as to how much industrial land we have to encourage certainly new and larger businesses to come into our region. And I think what we in Washington County, we really don't have a very good idea, nor, I guess if we do have an idea, it's that we don't have very much industrial land available. So this discussion would be probably inviting some outside experts to the table and to have the conversation about what is available and where is that available and how would we get this if we're so inclined to be ready for development and be able to encourage some industry, some new industry to come into our county. So I think this is just so that we have a better understanding of what opportunities we have and how we would go about making sure that organizations like Greater Portland Inc. are aware of that, as they are our regional marketing arm for this kind of work. So I think it's just, this could be really an hour-long discussion or less. That's my thoughts. Again, it's just having somebody come in and have that conversation with us.
I think this reminds me that in some of my conversations with members of the Metro Council, particularly one with Council President Peterson recently, she's had conversations with different mayors, such as with Mayor Callaway of Hillsborough, that there is land within the existing urban growth boundary. It's just that much of it is encumbered. We have land that is known to have parts of it as brownfields. And so, we instituted, I was a driving force for instituting a brownfield study when I was a Metro councilor. We now have a brownfields coalition. We now have a brownfields fund with zero to not very many dollars in it. So a whole statewide effort. And Council President Peterson, in talking with Mayor Callaway, that he knows that unless we're more successful in delivering that, as well as solving the advanced infrastructure funding, that we're probably going to be challenged by LCDC to expand land. So I don't think this is a Washington County only conversation. I think we'll rely upon our ECDev resources, as well as Commissioner Treese as our representative to MPAC, to draw on the information from Metro so that we can leverage that and have them come in and present to us, where do things stand now, and really invite that conversation with multiple parties. And they may be having that conversation already. It's just that we've been so heads down on our own work that we're not as aware of it as possibly we could be.
Well, and if I could just add just a little bit more to that, as we know, North Plains is working on their economic plan, and North Plains development capabilities come to Sunset Highway to the south, and certainly to Jackson School Road to the east, and includes that corner intersection of the Highway 26 intersection with Jackson School. And so they're working on that, and a portion of that land they would like to designate as industrial as well. So I think our conversation would be just a little bit broader if we bring in what North Plains aspirational projections are going to be and then coordinate that with some of the land that is, well, I'll call it available, but it's really not on the north side of the industrial Hillsborough. So just bigger picture. And again, it would just, that would be an update and certainly just informational, if nothing else, so that we're all aware of what some of the economic development plans are going into the next 10 years.
So what I'm hearing is that you and Commissioner Treese will be working with Ms. Angie and staff to figure out how to scope and program in a future work session topic. Okay, great. We'll have a interesting time sometime in 2022. Yes, Commissioner Fye.
Yeah, I was going to ask Jerry, are you just industrial lands? Is it just infill development, or are you also looking into like a redevelopment and also like expansion? I heard the word expansion. Does that mean expansion outside the UGB boundaries, or is that, because I'm also interested in knowing, like when you were talking about economic development, there's a lot of also unutilized and unused commercial spaces that we don't know the list of that could be redeveloped and used as an economic development venue. But so I'm not sure, is there boundaries to like industrial only, or could we expand it and say industrial lands as well as commercial spaces that are not used?
Well, the definition of industrial versus commercial are significantly different. And so, yes, when you're talking about commercial development opportunities, that becomes on smaller parcels and certainly is a much bigger inventory. I'll just say that. When we talk about industrial, we're talking about fairly significant developments, which might be $100 million to $1 billion to $3 or $4 or $5 billion, depending on how big the footprint is. And we don't have very many opportunities for development of, let's just say, 100 acres to come in to our region. And those opportunities don't occur very often, but they will never occur if you haven't identified where there's possibilities for them to develop. So I think that's the conversation, is the larger parcels. And it isn't the Intels of the world. But it is, 50 and 75 and 100 acre developments that require a very large investment by the company, and certainly enhanced employment opportunities and all those things that come along with it. So again, this would be designed to be an informational update to let you know what that looks like and what possibilities there are.
I think to Commissioner Fye's question, the focus really was around industrial, not commercial. That doesn't mean that the commercial opportunities especially for redevelopment, aren't many as well.
Yeah, and it sounds like because there's industrial redevelopment opportunities too, but you're focusing on infill development, right? Is that correct?
No, I think they're focusing more on greenfield.
No, and so maybe that's the purpose of this conversation, is so you can have some clarification of the difference between industrial and commercial, and the difference between the size of developments and all those kinds of things. So again, this just be an educational update on that. And I think Matt, Craigie could certainly provide that with the help of a couple of other people that we meet with on a regular basis, and you'd have a much better, clear picture of what it is we're talking about.
You're both right. We've been acquainted with more and more studies, real world case studies, that show that there is more industrial redevelopment going on in urban areas, having the light industrial, smaller footprint availability within existing communities. And that's becoming, the need for that is more prevalent than it has been in the past. So you're both right. There's a need to look at all types. And they all require some infrastructure funding and economic development positioning across the board. So none of it's easy. And they all foster new jobs and also job retention, which is good. So, okay, so on that, we've got some folks who will scope that out into the future. So we've worked through the current list and have a game plan. In addition to having a new item too. Great, thank you, everyone. All righty, so that takes care of our first two items on our agenda. We are at 10:50, so we've burned through a lot of time, and we have two more topics. You saw from my email that I thought we might go till 12:30, so hopefully you've made your plans accordingly. I would suggest at this juncture that we take a 15-minute break and then turn the agenda over to Ms. Angie for the two remaining topics. Sound like a plan? Okay, great. We'll see you back here then at 5 minutes past 11. Thank you. How are we doing, folks? Okay, well, we have 4 of the 5 of us here, so why don't we get rolling? 2 more agenda topics, budget sync up with Ms. Angie, and then county strategic plan process outcomes, early planning discussion. So boom, boom, take it away, Ms. Angie.
Thanks, Chair. Clerk Moss, can you bring up the budget process overview? So as the board recalls, we've recently talked about the budget process overview. So I just want to ground this conversation and where we are at in the process. So in August, September, we were in budget planning. We developed this budget process overview and talked about community engagement and use of the equity lens within the budgeting process. So now here we are. It seemed at one point it was a long ways away, but we are in October. And so this is the time to start the priority setting and the budget direction for me to be able to work with the budget team as well as the departments. So a couple key dates also ahead of us. On December 2nd, which was mentioned earlier today, is the town hall. And the town hall is focused on the budget, our economic realities, our budget realities, and what that means to service delivery. And then the rolling agenda, or the roundtable agenda, has time on January 6th for us to sync back up on what the board's priorities are, given what was heard in the town hall. So I just wanted to kind of ground that timing in the conversation. So this is really the first, and this is just to hear from you all what your thoughts are in giving initial budget direction, priority setting. So a couple questions that I'm curious to ask is, number one, what are the priorities that the board would like included within the budget? Number two, what are areas or county services that you would like to understand better as part of the budget development process? So I mentioned when we were reviewing the rolling agendas, we will be coming before you and providing more information about the community corrections, not just services, but how it relates to finances as well. So if there's other areas that the board would like kind of that deep dive prior to presentation of the budget, we can start to schedule those within the rolling calendar, rolling agenda months ahead. So this is really your time to talk and give me direction.
So board members, how about if we just go about this in a round table, round robin fashion, and give each one of us a chance to contribute a thought or an item, and then just keep going around. And it's okay if you don't have anything, because there's certainly a lot on the plate. So who would like to go first, or should I just call you out by the way I see your windows? Go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
Well, mine pretty simple. I don't have a lot to add, so I'm comfortable with the process that's been laid out. And I think that I know we've had a lot of discussion about this and how we're moving toward change, and I'm comfortable.
I just want to remind everyone that rather than having a set community investment conversation series, that we have pivoted our community engagement for this next fiscal year to cover in the December 2nd town hall what the budget realities and constraints are, so that our community has the opportunity to better understand what it is we are a bit more immersed in with regard to the budget and, costs versus revenue, pacing, and so forth. Additionally, Commissioner Treese and I had a conversation in a recent one-on-one about how our community engagement is revealing that the community engagement on the ESPD listening sessions specifically has revealed that many in our community, or at least some in our community, are not well versed in governmental revenue sources. So we were thinking about adding a second town hall for any commissioners who want to join us to offer the community a short but topical time to learn more about government finances, everything you always wanted to know about property taxes, fees, and levies, and go from there. And then our Q1 town hall would follow on with the budget. So the December town hall and then the Q1 town hall would, somewhere in that March, April timeframe, would come back to the budget and help our community understand how we are tracking with our proposed budget to be able to accomplish, certain things. But, we can't start something new without having the revenues to do it, sort of aspect.
I would just add that it was really the question of why can't we just incorporate the ESPD levy into our property taxes? And that was what triggered the thought of more conversation around the taxation process.
So I'll go next, Ms. Angie. From my standpoint, we have a lot of budget direction that we've already put into place. We're trying to, in addition to the service levels we already have, we've tried to best utilize the ARPA dollars. Frankly, I'd like to see that tranche 2 of ARPA is directed more at our thoughtful economic recovery and less so on public health. Then we've already given direction to move forward with the Center for Addiction Treatment and Triage. So there's both the capital expense there as well as the operational expense. We've already given direction for utilizing the equity lens, as you talked about, and making sure we have effective community engagement moving forward. Then, same laundry list. I'm just running through my mental inventory around the operationalizing equity through our contracting, both signing on policy-wise to the Construction Career Pathways program for workforce expansion, as well as looking at our contracting language to make sure we have utilization of apprentices. Let's see. And just, I put it, how do we make sure that we have a better understanding of service levels and service level options? Because clearly with costs outpacing costs for salaries, healthcare, and retirement outpacing revenue growth, we're going to have to make some kind of adjustments. for those discretionary revenue funded services. And I think that's where things are really challenging sometimes to talk with our community members. You know, we've done a good job over these last 2 years of helping them understand we have special funds and some directed, restricted funding, but they're still wondering how we're using our discretionary funds. And why can't we just keep doing more? So that's, to me, so I'm not looking to add something new because it feels like we have probably 15 pounds of flour we're trying to get into that 10-pound sack. I don't know about other colleagues.
Well, I guess I need to give this a little bit more thought. I like the suggestion that we review, communicate our sources of revenue and the limitations thereon. And certainly, I think probably, as I've said before, our property tax revenues certainly are not that as alone, that revenue stream alone is not going to be enough to sustain our increased demand on services. And so, you know, we can have that conversation, but that's certainly not in the immediate. That's out into the future. I like the part where we are trying to educate our community, albeit 30 or 40 or 50 people doesn't make a huge dent in our population, but it is good that we offer that. But I also, you know, I just don't want to get back into a scenario where the suggestions made, like it was last year, to defund police, and then obviously we got criticized because we didn't do what they wanted us to do. And you're saying, well, okay, thank you very much for your suggestion. And I guess I just don't want to present that opportunity for them to say, well, if this is what we asked for, are you going to give it to us? I mean, well, no, not necessarily, maybe, but certainly want to make sure that we're clear on our messaging and what we're communicating. So anyway, that's all. Budget priorities, Tanya, go find some more money because we need it.
The table is open, folks.
I have one comment and one suggestion. The comment is we talk about communities, but the reality of it, just as there's four of us with very diverse opinions maybe on things, there's very diverse communities as well. And I keep saying I represent an area in which 80% of the population's in cities. And so they have a very different need level and a very different idea of what county services should be than maybe in other areas. So if we do community engagement, I think we need to say what does that mean and what does that look like? And that segues, I guess, into our last topic of today. The minor point that I would make is I could have been Latricia. Somebody made the comment, and I wholeheartedly agreed with it, that we need to start looking at some of these outside nonprofits that are not providing, or we don't understand what the specific service is, but we're making contributions that are a substantial part of their budget. I think her comment was well taken. There should be, maybe 20, 25% of it, but if we're 100% of funding without a defined specific service level or need, meaning we just fund them, I don't think that's appropriate. And I would suggest that we take a look at that. That's a small item, I understand, but I would like to see us look at that. So that's my comment and my suggestion.
Ms. Angie, can you confirm that that's in the work plan rolling agenda to come back to that topic?
Yes, I can confirm that. And also we are looking at sponsorships as well within that conversation.
I'm same boat with Commissioner Willie. I need to give more thought to this and get back to you, Tanya, more thoughtful. And I think in terms of what Commissioner Rogers just said, I think people heard at that meeting, because I've had Commissioner Rogers groups that I've met with who are concerned that their budget is going to get cut because of the restructuring we're doing with the budgeting process. So I think people are, thinking through about what they need and looking into other funds to leverage. So that was some positive, I would say, coming out, even on their end. But yeah, give me more time and I'll get back to you, Tanya.
So stay tuned for the next roundtable or work session topics, so that we are speaking as one board of commissioners or 3 together versus 5 individual directions. Anything else, commissioners? Ms. Angie, in closing up this one topic, could you remind us of the next steps, please?
Yes, so the next steps, so thank you for this conversation. And I fully expect that there will be more ideas coming to me individually. The one, and also in our future roundtable discussions, the one item that I did not hear raised that I am intending to be considered as part of this upcoming process is the courthouse planning position. If the board recalls, we did not fund that, and we were looking at potentially bringing that forward in the supplemental. It's not being brought forward yet, so I just wanted to lift that item up because I didn't hear anyone speak to that. So the next steps in the process are the town hall in December, as the chair had indicated, and then the 2 of 2 conversation for board priorities will be in January.
All righty, so we've wrapped up that topic. Next, we'll move on to our first ever early planning discussion on brainstorming the process outcomes for a community strategic plan program. What are your thoughts, folks? What are some of the things you would like to see? If you had the benefit of fast forwarding out 2+ years after having that program, what do you wish you would have process outcome wise? Like things like community engagement or partners that you want to make sure are included, or your own participation, anything and everything. This is early feedback to provide to Ms. Angie before she starts framing up what a high level, 50,000 foot framework might be to come back to us as she looks to utilizing her staff resources as well as outside consultant resources to help us with such a major program. Any thoughts?
Chair, can I just add a bit more context before?
Yes, please. It's your topic.
Yeah, thanks. So if the board recalls, the board did have a process discussion when Julia Novak facilitated the meeting in July. Some of the outcomes from that process, there was rich conversation around community engagement, specifically some key stakeholders such as our CPOs, community-based organizations, especially culturally specific, public health orgs, and I could continue to go on, but we have that list. So I think there was robust community engagement discussion. There was also the thread of urban service provision, which was touched on earlier today. So I think from the July conversation, those were my key takeaways. And so if there's any additional information that you want to share, but it is included in the document that Julian Novak provided to you all.
Oh, I think it would be great if that's recirculated for this topic before it ever comes back to us again. A couple of things based upon your overview that came to my mind is I want to make sure that the process has covered county specific portfolio services, right? Because what counties do is different than what cities do. Yes, we have this aberration of providing a very limited suite of urban services for the urban unincorporated areas. But this is a county strategic plan. And first and foremost, I want to make sure we're successful in having an approach to continue to sustain our county services out into 2-3 decades. Okay. And I think another outcome is that it is informed by both the US Census information from the 2020 census, as well as future growth projections from PSU/Metro over that longer time period. Certainly with range forecasts and things like that, the confidence level goes down. But, as a region, we already have an adopted 90% confidence level population forecast. So let's remind ourselves of that and try to anchor, our current future and a couple of potential futures. So the county portfolio, making sure that leading up to that point, we've done a continued increased job, a higher yielding job of speaking about what county services are. But for those who may be introduced to this for the first time, we've got to make sure that we have materials, exercises, whatever, so that everybody knows what is a county, what constitutes a county. Secondly, and this will sound familiar to all of you because you remember that for this new MISTIP 23-28 cycle, I championed we've got to check in with our cities, right? Commissioner Rogers, again today, reminded us that in his district, District 3, 80% of the population in District 3 lives in incorporated cities. Well, we have 13 cities here in Washington County. I want those city councils to have confidence in what our process is. We're not trying to duplicate what cities do. We're trying to certainly partner with them, but we have to make sure we deliver on county services. So really, that's the meat of the matter for me. And I'm all ears with regard to models for approaching this kind of thing. I really want us to take a look at a few examples of other counties in the nation or jurisdictions, they may be cities, who have gone through a similar strategic planning process so that we can have confidence when we adopt a work plan for this major program and make sure we've got the funding for it, that we have confidence that we're going to end up with some products that are good examples, but also meet the need of being specific for Washington County. So those are my thoughts on what I'm looking for. Who else? has thoughts.
Sure, I'll jump in. And I suspect that I might be alone in these thoughts, but that's fine. We need to really understand what is a county service, because it's really, really different in terms of where you come from and who you pay as your overarching government. If you're in a city, you look at your city as providing most of those. Counties provide, we understand A&T, we've got to do that. We understand that they provide some level of policing and some level of activity in terms of planning outside of the city areas, because you don't want to go out there and have lawless areas or unplanned. We understand all that. What we don't understand is the overlapping duplicative services, and others here can argue, but there aren't any. Well, there are. Frankly, look at the screen. I can take on clean water services. I'm not picking on you, Diane, but frankly, the retail sewer business is a duplicative service that cities could do. And Multnomah County got out of that business a long time ago. That was one of the things they decided. Police services are duplicative in many areas. They certainly could be contracted. Planning, you wouldn't be planning at the level that you're doing. Roads, you would have major streets like we've talked about in the past, arterial collectors, freeways that would connect population centers, but you wouldn't get into the micromanagement of smaller facilities. There are so many things that it's hard to start the process and say, well, what would you like to see come out? It's, what do you want to be? I mean, it's anybody who's gone to business school or been around business school understands the old adage that they use out of Alice in Wonderland, where she goes to the Hatter and says, which direction do I take? And so, where do you want to go? She said, I don't know. She said, it doesn't matter what road you take. You can take any direction. We've punted this ball, not this board, but other boards, which I've been on, for a long time. And so what would be the outcome to me, just me personally? One, that we define who we are, where we're going, what really are services, are there economies of doing it in other ways, and being able to straight face say to folks who are in different taxing situations that you're not paying for anybody else's services, you're paying for our group services. So everybody knows that they're going to pay for the jail. Everybody knows they're going to pay for the A&T. Everybody knows they're going to pay for corrections. Everybody knows they're going to be paying for some level. But when it gets beyond that is where you get the rub. And so that's where I keep saying, how do you get to a point to know where you're going to go with this if you don't have a discussion of where you want to end up? And so that's my thoughts on this. And
I agree with you, Commissioner Rogers. We just use different words and a different number of words. But I'm in agreement with you. Yep.
Well, I'm going to kind of continue that same theme again, like you said, Chair, use maybe different words, but because I had this conversation the other day and I honestly can't remember who it was with or why we were having it, but it was a explanation of what services the county provides for countywide, what services we provide only to unincorporated, only to rural, and then vice versa, what services do cities provide just to cities. And so it was, to me, we take this conversation and I divided up into basically the three categories that the old strategic plan had that I didn't necessarily like, but it is three distinct areas. We are rural, we are unincorporated, we are urban. And then underneath that, we identify the common services, the services that we have to provide the urban unincorporated, and services that we have to provide rural. And so anyway, we just kind of, for me, it begins to flow downward from that and gets really overlapping and complex in some regards, but like the jail, like our district attorney. All those are services that we provide for the entirety of the county. And how does that, I guess, how does that impact our strategic plan? How is that going to, is it going to change over the next 10 or 15 or 20 years? All those kinds of conversations. So I guess that's where I go, and I try and, at this point, I kind of try and stay in that mode, because if I get too granular, then I get lost. And then I become like Roy's talking about, well, where do you want to go? Well, I don't know. I don't even know where I am. So, so I try and stay up here and then identify those in kind of a singular motion in each one of those areas. Anyway, that's kind of where I am, at least initially, in the strategic plan.
Commissioner Trees, Commissioner Fye, any thoughts on process outcomes you might be looking for, or any other comments that might help shape this process?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think what you've heard so far is really great, and I think you have a good direction in terms of the service looking at it. I think one thing I would like, in addition to what you've heard, is, I think it's something that I learned sort of like a lobbying 101, try to foresee, I hate to say foresee evil and sort of plan ahead, but I'm interested in, like, one of the process that comes out of our strategic plan is we, use the lessons that we've learned from displacement and try to come up with the strategies that mitigate that in the future. Because I think displacement, gentrification is inevitable as development will happen. And I think as a county, what is our strategies in the next, 10, 15 years to mitigate that? So I'm really hoping that, since this is going to be a document that, lives for a long time, what is the county's strategy to, when it comes to displacement and gentrification? I think those terms are used interchangeably, but whatever term we use, how do we mitigate the impacts to the community for that? So I think that's one process I'm hoping to come out of that. And then, I think in the conversations you're hearing around, what is the county level services? I live in an urban, unincorporated area of Washington County and utilize those services. And I'm not alone. There's so many. I think the census data showed that there's over 53,000 people that live in Aloha currently. This is the 2020 census data. So I think we need to have and what is the development level of commitment as a county to the unincorporated areas? Cities have, commitment to developing the streets, the sidewalks, their transport. What is our commitment as a county? Because I would argue there's a lot of unsafe routes in unincorporated areas of Washington County. Not all, some, but I think we need to have sort of like our own operational agreements to the unincorporated areas to say these are the services that we're going to commit to, and this is the level of the level of services that we're going to provide is going to be the same level as a city. So, you asked to shoot for the stars, so there you have it, Tanya.
If I could just add one more thing, and I'm sorry, Pam, I'm jumping in ahead of you, but because I am going to switch to remote here in about 5 or 10 minutes to make because I got to travel. Nafisa, I think what I heard you saying, and it's an interesting part, because I was actually focused on what services do we provide, and I certainly agree. And if we're going to establish a minimum service level, I mean, we've had this conversation with the residents of Aloha and others that if you want a higher level of services or have an expectation that we provide this, you're going to have to step up a little bit. We can't do it at the level of property taxes that the urban unincorporated pays. It's too low. So that's the dilemma. But the other, I was talking about rural and unincorporated urban. What I neglected was, I think a part of the strategic plan is going to have a fairly good description of our relationships that we have with other organizations, and our commitment to diversity and equity and inclusion and all of those things. So it's kind of like, one part is where the rubber meets the road, which is the services, those kinds. The other is the philosophy of what we're going to be as a county and what we're going to focus and prioritize as far as our relationships and our commitment to be the best place to not only work, but the best place to live. And so that part to me is going to be a critical part as well. I'm glad I'm not going to be writing any of this because I'm terrible at this, but conceptually, that's, I guess, what I was envisioning.
I've listened to what you've all said, and I think that we also, and I'm not quite sure how to do this, but I think we need to have the discussion of what does annexation mean. And, I think that that's the balance piece to communities' needs and wants. And I recognize that it's not I recognize that we don't have any control over that, but the reality is that the people that are receiving the services do. So, that's another piece. And I guess the underlying thing for me is always making sure that we have that communication line between our residents and our processes. So that's the other piece I'd add.
Could you clarify for me what that last part was? I didn't quite understand what you were getting at. I'm sorry.
About communication? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Again, it's making sure that we are that we've got as we set our plan, or as we're taking in information, that there's communication points along the way, Catherine. I mean, it's something that we do. I'm not worried that we won't do it. I just want to make sure that we continue to get the feedback in.
Yep. It's clear we have checkpoints by which we are collecting information, then playing back what we heard and what we think we're doing with that information. That sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And maybe it's, in my mind, it's also tied again to that annexation issue. When we're talking to our communities about what their needs and wants are, then offering potential solutions to those things.
Yeah, even if we don't own those. Yeah, right. Yep. Okay. Anything else, colleagues?
Yeah, I think it's interesting what Commissioner Tree said around the annexation. I really think it's a good idea to have a section that's like, what is the process of annexation? Because I think people in certain districts are not annexing. It's just that will cities take up an unimproved roads? And I think, that's a conversation to have with cities. And I assume and argue that cities will not take that responsibilities, in terms of a jurisdictional transfer, a road that isn't up to the standards at the city level. So I think I'm hoping that with the annexation, it's also good to have that conversation of jurisdictional transfer within cities and the counties, and then to talk about like what is the level of standard that we should be having that conversation of how do we transfer things, because There are certain people that want to annex, to Jerry's point, in some of my districts, but not everybody is anti-taxing or taxes. There are certain people that want to, but I think it's about the city embodying and taking on ownership of a roads that's not up to the city standards. So I think it's bigger than saying the people's property is low and they don't want to annex. I think the conversation is much bigger at a government system level.
And I think we have to be careful to ensure that everyone knows there isn't some determination, right? The answer for the cities isn't no, right? In my conversations with different mayors and different city councilors, they're like, don't presume that the answer is no. Those days are long gone. So, there's a world of possibilities out there. We'll have to explore them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that reminds me, in my early conversation I learned so much from Stephen Roberts and Chris, and one of the conversation I had with ODOT was around Farmington. Everybody knows Farmington is super problematic, and it is our 82nd version in Washington County. But one of the things I learned from that was this thing called jurisdictional transfer, and ODOT was happy to transfer that road to the county, but the county isn't going to take that responsibility because the road needs so much improvement, and why take that liability? So I think the conversation, you're right, Chair Harrington, is that yes, and put money on the table, and I think that's what the cities will also do.
Welcome to the regional table. Commissioner Rogers and I know this topic very well from our years of service on JPACT. Yep. Okay, any last comments to close? Commissioners or Ms. Angie? I'll leave it to you, Ms. Angie, to summarize what you've heard here today and go from there.
I'd ask Miss Angie, was this helpful? Is this the input that you were looking for?
This was very helpful. I think we continue to narrow the funnel into a process. And so I am confident with the information that I've received from the board to date that I can come back in 2022. I had to look at the year because I couldn't believe I was saying 2022 with a high level framework and get feedback on the framework that then can be built out.
Yeah. My gut sense, based upon what we have for themes, emerging themes for the first half of 2022, economic recovery, our need to work on our fiscal situation, as well as track both state and federal changes, programs, and resources, that organizationally, I, as one of five, I'm not expecting Ms. Angie to come back to us with any sort of framework, draft work plan until the second half. Now, she can always surprise us sooner. I'm all for that. But just trying to manage my own expectations that she needs the time to do that work. Does that make sense for everybody? You okay with that, Ms. Angie? Or do I need to be corrected or set on a different course?
No, I will provide updates though of where I'm at in that process to the board, because the strategic plan, I will say our employees are looking forward to this process as well, similar to the conversation that you all had today, as well as I know our community partners. So it is important that we're following this through.
Yep, all towards formation before we have a draft program. I'm all for that. Let's keep all the conversations going. We've got a lot of great collaboration and partnership here in Washington County, also known as the west side of Portland. So, great. Well, I think that brings us to a close on our different topics for today's roundtable. Was there anything else that commissioners want to share or reflect on? Okay. Well, I continue to be all ears on what things you want to have some informal conversation time on, like we have here today. And I try to frame that up in collaboration with Ms. Angie, Ms. Taniguchi Dennis, and Mr. Carr. So we have our draft our draft round table, too many R's, plan going forward. So if you have any other thoughts, don't hesitate to let me know. Okay, well, without further ado then, I'd say we are adjourned for this day, October 7th. Have a great afternoon, everybody. See ya.